Episode 22 of The Drive-By is sponsored by Playground. Check out the Chase the Ace game show, which I host every single Sunday beginning at 1 p.m. and draws every half hour leading up to the game show after 8 o'clock on Sunday nights with a shot at a rolling $25,000 progressive jackpot. And someone is guaranteed to win a fully electric Mazda MX GT with our Lucky Keys finale bringing an end to Chase the Ace on Sunday, July 3rd. Check out playground.ca for more information and more about Canada's premier gaming facility later on during this podcast. The winning begins on The Drive-By and at Playground.
This is The Drive-By with Freeway Frank.
What's happening? Welcome to episode 22 of The Drive-By. I'm Freeway Frank. All right. Where was I the last couple of weeks? I missed my first ever Drive-By podcast. Didn't think I would ever miss a week. How hard is it to do one podcast a week? Believe it or not, harder than you think. It hasn't been easy. I've been trying and thinking about other ways of making this podcast even more popular, and that would mean doing multiple podcasts per week. And so I've tried my best to try to get there week by week. And then I was hit by, I got COVID. People were wondering, some people DMing me saying, where are you? Did you leave the country? Did you quietly leave the country and somehow make it somewhere? No, I had COVID. And I'm doing okay. Thanks for asking, I think, much to the dismay of some of my critics and haters. There's a few people out there who, went a little crazy during the last 2.5 years and think I play for the Satan team. And I'm sure are not happy to see me here. Not that anybody would wish me any ill will or want to see me drop dead, but, just to say, I told you so, I guess for some people, it would be enough to say, he never made it back on episode 22. Well, here I am. I did make it back. And sorry to break the news to you, I survived COVID. Let me tell you a little bit, though, about my COVID experience. I got it first, and then my wife, even though she only tested later on, and she had a, faded second line, I had the 2 strong COVID lines on the antigen test, and she ended up getting it after I did. I didn't really have any symptoms besides, achy muscles, bones, joints, fatigue. That's about it. 2 days into it, last Thursday, I had an episode. La-da-da-da-da. It's the motherfucking Eagle Double Frank. Snoop Frank. Had a hard time breathing. And I thought to myself, what's going on here? COVID is it's true what they say about the lower respiratory. And it came out of nowhere, literally. And I had a hard time breathing for about half an hour, 48 hours into it. I had no sore throat. I had no upper respiratory issues. I had no cold. I had, at the time, no sniffles. Got some sniffles over the weekend. That's about it. Barely had a fever at the beginning. Never went to the bathroom. No crazy shit, literally and figuratively happening to me. So when this came out of nowhere, lower respiratory issues, for about half an hour, as I said, I'm not going to lie to you, I got a little scared, right? You're like, well, what's going on here? And then I go, oh, that's the COVID they talk about. Again, never have I been a COVID denier. I've always been someone who said, we have to learn to live with it. We have to make sure we don't close up society. We have to make sure we don't hurt the people more by not solving and moving with the times and fixing our healthcare system and trying to find solutions with every wave, as opposed to, oppressing the population and telling them they have to stay in and they have to mask up and do everything they can to save every single individual, which is crazy when you think about it. But that's what they tried to do over the course of 2.5 years. But besides the point, I ended up, after, as I said, being in a little bit of difficulty breathing, mixing up a concoction of things that I will not discuss because we have too many snowflakes. I think the people who follow me could probably figure out what I ended up taking. And there's too many snowflakes out there who will just fucking lose their shit if I say a couple of or certain things that entered my concoction mix. By the way, this is water. This is no concoction. But let me tell you, immediately after taking this concoction, I felt great. About half an hour later, I was breathing again, and it's like it didn't exist. And the weird thing is, it really came out of nowhere. It really hits you out of nowhere. And the people I know who have had COVID and who have had this, lower respiratory scare, if you will, experienced the same it literally comes out of nowhere. Now, I don't know if you're obese and out of shape, elderly. I would imagine with, immunocompromised system, this would be tough on you. There's no doubt about it. And depending on how you're treating it, if left untreated, in my opinion, and you're just hoping it goes away, each to their own. But I took matters in, like Judge Wapner used to say on the People's Court, I took matters in my own hands. You take matters into your own hands. You take them to court. Instead, I said, you know what? I got to take care of myself here, so I'm going to do what I have to do. And I did, and felt almost immediately better half an hour into it. Half an hour. And then another concoction 24 hours later, even better. And then it was only about, testing positive. And it's like, is this thing ever going to not test? Is this thing going to test negative at some point? And eventually it does. But the thing that I learned about COVID is it makes you tired, fatigued, and it hits people differently depending on, I guess, what variant you have. And in my case, no clue. But it wasn't any worse. I had trouble breathing in 2017 when I got hit with the flu. And it's because I was stuffy and my head felt like it was going to explode, and didn't have any of that this time. But again, had another experience that I just mentioned that I thought, whoa, okay, I get it. So you have a lot of free time when you are sick, when in this instance having COVID, and there's no doubt about it that being sick, not being able to do anything and really feeling lousy, not being able to simply, go out and cut your grass, let's say if you wanted to, or get into the car and go grocery shopping, didn't do any of that, haven't yet. You get a lot of time to think, a lot of time on your hands. And look, I'm not going to lie here. Getting COVID was worse for my mental health than my physical health, truthfully, because it brings you into this, like, okay, you finally get it 2.5 years later. I thought, Iron Man, I'm never going to get this. You know what I'm saying? This streak is going to continue. And eventually it doesn't. Time runs out for everybody. Eventually everybody will get it. And so when you're sitting there and you're on the couch and you start to, get down because you can't do anything, and it's the third day, fourth day, fifth day, and you're like, you just want this to end like any other time that you're sick at home, and you realize how important your health is. You start thinking of things, which is what I started thinking about. And I was rethinking life. I was rethinking the podcast and what I'm doing. Former career, radio, what I said in the last 2.5 years. Not that you're second guessing yourself, because you should never second guess, but everything that pretty much I've done in the last couple of years. And I'm sure a lot of people have gone through this, where they start to reassess. You have a lot of free time, as I said, when you're sick. So your mind just wanders, and it's going 100 miles a minute or a second. And you're just thinking of everything, Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Is this the best place for me? And, as this is happening, things are happening in our society, and things are happening on the, in the political world, like Bill 96 here in Quebec, which I think would be better as Bill 69 because they've literally flipped the English-speaking community and are effing them on both sides. So I call it Bill 69. This is not good. This is not a good thing, what's happened. And so when you see that happen, and again, you're at this low point, and I think a lot of people have gone through this low point before society reopened a couple of weeks back and masks were dropped and things start to feel normal again. We all hit moments in our life where we question things and look back, look at where we are and where we're headed. So you see Bill 96 happen again. And to me, even though it's not a Quebec referendum, the word separation is never uttered. The words separation and referendum never uttered. But pretty much what this Bill 96 does is oppress the English community here in Quebec, where we have a very strong English community. Was it million plus? And it is shocking to me that something would pass so easily without our, almighty prime minister doing anything about it. Or, there's some protests. There are people standing up for English rights and who are out there opposing Bill 96. But what is our government doing, our federal government? In the past, even somebody like Justin Trudeau's dad stood up for Canada, stood up for English people in Quebec. And again, I want to make it very clear. First of all, what's this guy doing? We know he's not doing much on many levels, but nothing. So François Legault has set himself up beautifully for a landslide victory this coming fall, and our government does nothing. And as I said in the past, we've had leaders, prime ministers who have always fought to keep Canada together. And again, I wanted to make this very clear. I'm a proud Quebecer. I speak French. I even host events in French and English where I start off by speaking French as well as I can. I'm not perfect or anything close to it, but I respect the people. I have French, francophone, as we say here in Quebec, friends. I care about them. And I get it. I get it that, Quebec is immersed in this North American, very English continent. And I understand where the language might be at risk, but it's nowhere close to being at risk because, anytime I speak to my French friends, and I have many of them, or people come over to do work at my house and they speak French and I address them in French, and sometimes they might go to English, but, and I've had these conversations with 20-year-old francophones and 15-year-old francophones and all that, and they're not going to stop speaking French. So what if they learn English? It'll only better prepare them for living in this world where English is everywhere. I mean, you arrive at Charles de Gaulle Airport in France, and maybe this is what Quebec doesn't want, but there's English signs everywhere in France, in Paris. So here in Quebec, it's just like it's that never-ending battle to make sure, we're at 93%, 94%. There's no risk. There's never going to be a risk. We're not Louisiana, where it's 0.3% or 3%? I don't know. I'm confusing it with COVID now. But we're nowhere close to it being there. It will never happen. It will never happen with having these laws in place already, like Bill 101. It will never happen with French signs dominating everywhere. But we live in a world where English is predominant, whichever way you look at it. So as long as the generations and people are teaching their kids the French language, because that's what they're proud of and that's what their culture is all about, we'll never lose it. But to get to a point where you oppress a certain part of society, in this case, English people, from not being able to speak, and we want to check your phones and we want to make sure that, you're speaking French at work and this and that, and it's this never-ending thing that caused me and people like me to leave in the first place, because I left back in 1993. I wasn't coming back. I didn't come back for 18 years. I only came back to the gig I had on Montreal morning radio. Had that not happened, I would never have returned to this place, because this conversation, even though it was quiet in the last, I would say 5 years or so, seems to seep through and make its way back all the time, some way or another. But I got to say, Legault is pretty slick, because he didn't go down the, he learned from the Pierre Pellado and Pauline Marois path, which was destructive. And the minute they brought up referendum separation, no one wants to hear that. And so that conversation quickly ends, and those people are quickly pushed out and their popularity decreases. And so he's managed to do all this, and then under the guise of, through a pandemic where he speaks softly, and this is like, I'm not a bad guy, and I'm taking care of the Quebec people, and we're a proud nation, la fierté, whatever. I need to go back and maybe this is what he's talking about. People need to be proud of who we are and where we are and the language we speak. I get that, but at the same time he is, and my friend had first said this, the wolf in sheep's clothing. He truly is. And he's managed to pull this off without, as I said, mentioning those two dreaded words that no one wants to hear in Quebec, and managed to pull off the biggest heist with Bill 96, which I don't think is legal, in my opinion. I mean, it's baffling to me that this would even go through. And I know there are people and lawyers that are looking at all aspects of it, and hopefully, going to try to fight it and make sure it gets rescinded. Now, as I said, you're sick, you're thinking of this, so Bill 96 comes up in my mind, and then I'm like, my wife is not from here originally, and she works remotely, and again, you start thinking, cost of living has gone up, inflation is through the roof, the real estate market is calming down. You start looking at everything around you, and you're like, what am I really doing here? What am I doing? I'm not the only person having this conversation. People are having this conversation tonight because I'm getting DM'd by people who tell me they're having these discussions with their significant others and at the dinner table and with their children, and my kids are not going to stay here, and my kids are moving to America, and my kids are going to Toronto, and my kids are going wherever. People are wanting to leave more than ever. Well, is that in the strategy of the Legault government? Is, by doing this, you're going to push people out, and then we'll push these people out, we'll move more French in, and we'll be okay. But I think destructive, absolutely destructive, because if you remember the mass exodus of companies back in the 70s and in the 80s and again in the 90s, do we want that? I mean, or do we want to be a competitive, you want Montreal to be world-class and competitive? We can't be doing things like this. And as that's happening, then you see the Conservatives here in Canada proposing a motion for things to get back to normal. And the Canadian government, the Liberal NDP, had a chance to officially end the pandemic and travel restrictions, and they didn't. So then you start thinking, why? Why are we the only country on the planet doing this? Where's the science for this? There's no science. It doesn't exist. There's no science because there's no other place. They've moved on everywhere on the planet. And we're still holding on for dear life to this, holding this over the people. Trudeau, the tyrant, holding this over the people. The same way François Legault is holding it, Well, they kind of let it go because he has an election coming up and he has other things to think about, like making, French so dominant that he gets reelected in a massive victory come this fall, which is going to happen. Because I took care of the Quebec population, I'm taking care of you, and we're proud, and this, I'm taking care of the language, and I'm doing it all. François Legault could do no wrong, right? Meanwhile, nothing gets fixed in the healthcare system. Who knows what's going to happen again this fall? God forbid we go down the road and talk about that again. But let's talk about Trudeau, the tyrant, and a chance to, just move on, take the next step, show everybody that we have taken that step because everybody else has. We've moved on. But no, here he is earlier in the week speaking on the podium with all his cronies behind him wearing masks. If you recall, Trudeau was in the Ukraine a couple of weeks back, wasn't wearing a mask. Picks and chooses where he wears the mask. Met the Queen, didn't wear it. Now wearing it, goes up, takes it off. Everybody, as I said, all the weasels in the Liberal Party behind him wearing masks. And the only thing, in my opinion, missing in that picture are tracksuits and matching Nikes. Remember the Heaven's Gate cult? This is what they look like. They look like, in the late 90s, the Heaven's Gate cult. Remember, the spacecraft was supposed to arrive and take these cultists to the Hale-Bopp comet. That's the way they look. They look like a cult. They look deranged and they look demented. They look absolutely insane. Their eyes, who's that? There's an Italian dude that I can't remember what his name is. His eyes are like this. You can't see anything else because he's still wearing that stupid mask. They look possessed. People in the Trudeau government and now the NDP, which has formed the coalition, look like they drank some Hale-Bopp premix and are waiting to leave altogether. They look insane and they look crazy to the world because, as I said, we've moved on. And people are saying, Frank, why are you still talking about this? Because to me, it is, I had a lot of free time with COVID. It is absolutely insane that nobody else is talking about this. I know there's some people on my stories, Instagram, I see them posting, still fighting for it. There's still 6 million unvaccinated, not anti-vax, unvaccinated Canadians. 6 million that are being punished for what? Even Italy has suspended the Green Pass, and they were pretty uptight about things over there in my home country. Or I should say, this is my native land, home country. Both my countries. Family's there, but I'm Canadian, yes. But, okay, you get what I'm saying? Everywhere, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere, they've moved on. Everywhere. And here, the charade continues. It continues. The insanity, the craziness continues. How do you stop? How can you stop talking about it? I see these scenes, I get agitated. They politicize everything. The mass shooting happened in Texas. There's our prime minister right away. It's that political opportunity to get up there. This guy is the biggest fraud and actor that we have in Canada. He's not even a good actor. He's the biggest fraud, okay? He's ready to politicize everything and anything to make sure he stays in power. This guy's sick. And all his cronies in the back, they look, as I said, they look like they've all lost it. So you get to think, you have a lot of free time, you think about a lot of things, and you think, well, Canada's not looking good, and inflation is going through the roof, and this coalition government seems to now be in power. They're going to be in power for the next couple of years or longer. And what the hell's going on? And all I hear people talking about is, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave. Get the hell out of here. We're moving here. And some people have. Some people have taken, the initiative, packed everything up, and left already, or have plans to do it. Because what kind of future? What kind of future do you have here? I met with a friend of mine who's been dear to me, and we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I was giving him some ideas I had about expanding this podcast and making it bigger and better. And he said, you really want to do that here? And he made a good point. And I asked, well, why do you say that? And he goes, Frank, I mean, look what's happening. I mean, now with Bill 96, and others trying to squeeze out every last, Anglo, and people want to leave here, and look how they handled the pandemic. And it's true. And you start to think, what if I can move personally this studio anywhere else and do this anywhere else? Why am I here? It's hard to explain, but when you're born and raised in Montreal and you're a Montrealer, even when you leave, all you talk about is Montreal. It's weird. I have friends living in Los Angeles, Vancouver, Toronto, Vegas, everywhere, and they still talk about Montreal. I mean, it's so much better to talk about, by the way, and reminisce about when you're living somewhere else, especially when it's warmer. And you're like, oh, Montreal, Schwartz's and this and that, and the Canadians, and just for laughs, and, great summers, and beautiful women, and well-dressed people. But when you're living in the moment here, it just sucks the life out of you. And it's this province that just sucks the life out of you, and the politicians that just can't let it go. Politicians have single-handedly, in my opinion, in the last 2.5 years, ruined this province. Not to say it wasn't before, and ruined this country. For their own reasons and own selfish purposes, their $170,000 a year pensions after 6 years of serving as an MP, that's why all those cronies are sitting behind the Prime Minister or standing with their stupid masks still on and playing this game. Because they have no choice. They have families to feed, and that's the reason. Because I had to come to some conclusion, some understanding. So why are these people... Are they this dumb? They can't be this dumb. I mean, they drank the Kool-Aid. They drank the Trudeau Kool-Aid. That's what they did. And the spaceship hasn't arrived to take them elsewhere, unfortunately. I'm not suggesting that wasn't a good story, by the way, with the Hale-Bopp comet and Heaven's Gate cultists. So I'm not suggesting, nor would I be mean to say, I hope the same thing happens to them. No, I'm not a terrible human being, but they look like cultists, and they have those eyes. You know those eyes? Yes, master. So, all right, let's change the topic here. Wow. Where's the funny, Frank? Well, how funny can this be? I mean, these are, it's... I've had comedians on here. We shoot the shit. We have a good time. We laugh. We have a couple of drinks. We're honest. We make some jokes. They tell some stories. I tell some stories. Sometimes we're here for the truth. Sometimes I'm here to tell everybody you're not alone. I'm here and I'm thinking of these exact same things you're thinking about. And the question is always, why are we here? Because we're here. Roll the Bones. Great Rush song. Big story out of Toronto in my former, and I shouldn't say former because it's not like I've closed, I love radio, as I always say, hate what the radio industry has become, but don't ever want to close the last latch on the door to radio because it brought me everything I have in my life. And I'm very thankful. But I don't like what I'm seeing, haven't liked what I've been seeing for the last couple of years. And hearing these stories coming out of our nation's capital and coming out of Toronto in the last week and a half, there's a morning show on a rock station in Toronto, Q107. The host, John Derringer, you might remember, took, at the time, I think, Terry DeMonte left in the 90s and before Howard Stern came in, if I'm not mistaken. John Derringer came in to do like 6 months here. He's like a legendary jock, legendary radio host personality from Toronto, and he came here to Montreal to do radio. It didn't work out because I think he was talking about how much he loved the Leafs, and that didn't cut it. And he sounded out of place. A Montrealer could pull off being in Toronto, but a Torontonian in Montreal, ça marche pas là. It doesn't work as well. People have pulled it off, and I'm not saying certain people can't, but you really have to assimilate into the Quebec culture quick, because if not, people will figure you out and deem you a fraud or a faker, and they won't accept you, because we like here in Quebec, and we like here in Montreal, and in media, we like it's like we're not opposed to people coming from other parts of the country. That's great, but we want people to understand what this culture is all about. And if you come in and you bring that outside, culture in Montreal on the radio, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work as much as you try. So anyway, John Derringer has been taken off the air since allegations surfaced about a week and a half ago of alleged years of abuse by him over his, again, I say alleged, because now they've brought in a third party. They've taken him off the air. They brought in a third party to investigate what truly happened here. And this was abuse, alleged abuse over the years by him over his female co-hosts. And not only did one co-host come out, who was one of his most recent co-hosts, I think for 2 years, 17 to 2019, something like that. But then another co-host came out, and yet another co-host came out, and yet another co-host came out. And these, by the way, are not just, females that... These are high-quality broadcasters, female broadcasters, the best of the best. Some of the best that I've heard, and some of the most popular in Toronto. And why would they be making it up? That's my question. And then... you hear things through the years, and I've never worked there personally, but you hear things about different people over the years. And then you start to piece the stories together, and then you go, one came out, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is sounding a lot like Bill Cosby. There's something going on here, okay? So, allegedly, he called them names, allegedly belittled them, with many of these women and his co-host going to HR and trying to reprimand him and tell them what was really going on. And their immediate, bosses telling them, figure it out, basically. No help offered. Some made to feel they were the problem. And basically, what they were telling them, either directly or indirectly, is that John Derringer was an untouchable. Okay. Some were even allegedly paid. This is crazy, by the way. But Derringer pay. This is nuts. So, in other words, money to stay quiet, to keep them from talking, because this show is a, revenue generator, big show in Toronto. And so, no chance they were getting rid of this guy, even though they were looking the other way. And I know some of these people that look the other way. It's despicable. It's despicable. Because how can you look the other way when there's abuse happening? Verbal abuse happening. Apparently there were years of smoking and vaping going on in this studio where, one particular co-host was complaining, saying, these guys are smoking, they're vaping in the room, I can't breathe. Nothing was done. Nothing. Think about that for a second. It's just like, F you. You don't like it? Get out. Why have an HR department at that point? If they're not, they're in big trouble. Basically, the company is in the hot water now, and the host has been taken off the air, and his 2 male co-hosts. Again, they're investigating, but this doesn't end well. I don't think, my prediction is this career is over. It's done. Okay? And then another story comes in from Ottawa, another morning show, allegedly again, another Ottawa morning show under fire. And they seem to be brushing it under, they're not even acknowledging it at all so far. A former female co-host there has complained that she was allegedly abused both verbally, mentally, physically as well by both males or one of the males on the show, allegedly again. It is nuts to me. it is nuts, but at the same time, I've seen how mostly men too have been first-handedly abused in the radio industry. I've seen it. And I'm not necessarily saying I was a fly on the wall or eavesdropping. You could see it happening right before you. And many women have been the brunt of this abuse and not treated fairly and not paid fairly and, always told, well, there's nothing we can do. And now it's coming out. And I think there's going to be more and more of these similar situations happening across the country in the radio industry, and people calling out their former colleagues and abusers, alleged abusers. Because it happens. And it's been happening for a long time. And it's unbelievable to me how, especially in this world that we live in, that they would not have learned from the last couple of years and at least said, before this gets any worse, let's take matters into our own hands here and terminate these people and end it, so that we say, you know what, we realized our mistake. What are they going to do now? These companies are going to have to come out and apologize and do something, because what they allowed to happen in their studios, especially to these females who were pros and professionals and in many instances just as talented as their male host. Just because one person has the name on the show and one person is the legend, it doesn't mean that those other people don't have the ability and talent. We understand sometimes it's that person's show. But man, when this stuff comes out, look at what happened to Ellen. When this stuff comes out, things come to an end abruptly for these people, because how do you have to address it. And most places will address it by terminating these people, these alleged abusers, or canceling shows or productions. And it's just unbelievable to me that this type of stuff happens in my industry. And I think people need to be extremely careful moving forward, extremely careful, because so many things have happened in my industry over decades that have been swept under the table. And when the Pandora boxes start to open, let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of shit coming out on so many different people, just like the big personality in Toronto, that people are going to turn really quick. And I've been watching the social medias. They're being destroyed because, innocent till proven guilty. But then when it's one after another, one person after another, then you have to start wondering, what's truly going on. Hope you're enjoying episode 22, sponsored by Playground, where they have something happening every single day of the week, just minutes south of downtown Montreal and Ganawage. You could click on the link below right now if you're watching on YouTube to get your $10 in Freeway Play, or go to playground.ca/FreewayFrank if you're listening instead, and check out some of the great promotions happening there every single day. Check out Pas de Rouge Mondays and Fridays, free gas Tuesdays, with a shot at winning gas cards worth $50 to $500, 7 and 8 p.m. contests every single Tuesday night. Hot seat draw Thursdays, also booming Wednesdays, went a little ahead of myself there, and ladies' night Wednesdays, very cool. Sweet Saturdays, where Playground rolls out the sweet table like no other. And it's like you're literally at an Italian wedding, but you don't have to wait till midnight for the food coma to begin. It all starts at 10 p.m. And on Sundays, I'm your game show host for the Chase the Ace game show with a rolling progressive, a shot at winning up to $25,000, and possibly somebody guaranteed to win a 2022 electric Mazda MX-30 on the final day when we play the Lucky Keys contest on Sunday, July 3rd. It's a playground for adults every single day. The fun awaits you and your crew. Great staff and attention to detail is what makes Playground Canada's most talked about destination for poker with those incredible bad beat jackpots and electronic gaming devices. Thank you once again, The Playground, for sponsoring this episode. Wanted to say a few words about a former colleague of mine. And since we were talking about radio going in, I'm coming out with more radio. I wanted to, first of all, congratulate my friend, Tony Marinero, for his next career move, which will be coming up at the end of summer. And Tony is moving on from his 20-year reign on Montreal radio at TSN. And this came to an end last week when he handed in his resignation. And as I said, he'll be moving to what looks like the French side of radio. And he'll announce all those details and talk about what's happening with his career. And I think it's a great move for Tony. But at the same time, it is a sad day for English, especially English sports radio in Montreal. Why do I say that? Because losing a talent like Tony after 20 years and the audience he's built and the things he's done for the community, how he always represented himself in the radio station like no other. And I say this not because I'm also a friend of Tony's and I've got to know him over the years. I know he's a good person. I know he's a quality guy and a great family man, husband, and devoted father. And I'm proud of him. But at the same time, as I said, this is not good for English radio in Montreal. So, takes me to giving my thoughts on what I would have done if I were in charge and Tony had walked into my office and said he was leaving. Personalities like Tony Marinero don't come around often. I know this is going to hurt the egos of a lot of other radio people, great radio people in Montreal, talented radio people, skilled broadcasters, but personalities like Tony don't come around a lot. There is a reason why Tony is able to do the things he does, and his audience always follows him. And his audience is always there, and he's a polarizing character, so he has his fans, he has his haters. There's no in-between with Tony, right? It's black and white. There's no gray. And that's what he's all about, but that's what's kept him successful. And as I said, a lot of people will not want to hear this, but there's no other Tony Marinero coming to replace this departing Tony Marinero. And I'm not saying that people that are going to take over his time slot are not educated in sports or hockey or not able to keep a conversation going. That's not what I'm saying. There are great broadcasters in that building, but there's only one Tony. So I would never have let him leave that day, the office that day that he presented the resignation letter to me. Now, I think to myself, why would a guy like Tony leave? Well, he'll tell you eventually. He'll express his thoughts and feelings. It's not up to me to say that, but I could speculate, right? I could definitely speculate. And I'll tell you this, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And Tony's departure will hurt. Not just hurt, I think will cripple that radio station. And I'm not saying, as I said, there's no other talented people there. They're all talented. but a broadcaster personality, larger than life figure, they don't make them that easily. You can't go into manufacturing warehouse and put out 1,000. You could put out 1,000 guys like this or people like this, but you can't create a Tony Marinero by trying to reproduce him. Or that's natural. That's talent that comes instinctively, that comes from within. And I think this love fest with Tony Marinero on the podcast is necessary, because I would have never let him leave. You never allow somebody like that to move on. You got to do what you have to do to keep him. And so what happened? Tony will come out eventually and give his story if he wants to, or tell that side of the story. But at the end of the day, the important thing to mention here is you don't leave a place you're happy being at. That's the bottom line. So you can take away from this what you want, but at the end of the day, if he was enjoying his time there, no matter what he says, he would still be there. But he's leaving for reasons only known to Tony, which he will say at some point. But Tony Marinero will be okay. The radio station he leaves behind, when you lose people like Tony, and in the last couple of years of Montreal radio has lost some pretty big personalities. You can't replace those personalities. You can't. So it's a sinking ship, as I said, and the holes are getting plugged in as quickly as possible. But that ship has sailed. Radio is in its twilight to begin with. And seeing a guy like Tony Marinero walk out of your studio for another gig, you better have that emergency life raft to save you, because you're in the middle of the ocean and you're hitting nothing but water. And Tony Marinero, they don't make him like him. And as somebody who has worked in radio all my years, I knew the minute I heard Tony, he had something special. The same way when I first heard other radio greats, including the guy that Tony looked up to was the guy I looked up to. I just never pursued sports radio. But Ted Teven was a legend to me. And he wasn't only a legend, as some people say, he thinks he's a legend in his own mind. Ted Teven was a legend. He's a radio legend. They just don't make him like that anymore. And Tony, in his own way, with his own personality, has put his mark and made his mark in Montreal radio. And it's so sad, especially I was talking at the beginning of this podcast with Bill 96 and the Quebec government doing what they're doing to try to, oppress the English community even more so. And now to see a guy leaving and walking across the street and going to a French entity, and he speaks French very well. That's their huge gain. And the Anglophone Montreal radio scene's massive, massive loss. Tony, I wish you the best. And I hope to have Tony at some point on the drive-by, because I think he would be a hoot, as we said in Western Canada, and an incredible guy to sit down and talk to. Because I've had 2-3 hour conversations with Tony on FaceTime. And I always thought to myself and turned to my wife after and said, this would be great. No holds barred conversation with two guys who love radio and are friends, talking about everything under the sun, sports and everything, the biz, you name it, our culture, life, the beautiful game, the second most beautiful game, the third most beautiful game, whatever it is. Tony, I wish you the best of luck. All right. I think I'm done. I think I'm done. I'm done because, oh, by the way, I still feel under the weather. I'm not making up any excuses or anything, but I still feel a little fogged, little brain fog, and slow, for that matter. And so I didn't think I would be able to pull off, talking for the amount of time I've talked for already during this podcast, but I had to do it, and I wasn't going to miss another week. But I want everyone to know that I'm thinking hard about how I can improve. I love doing the drive-by, and I'm thinking hard about how I can improve this product, how I can expand it. If that means doing it more often, so be it. That'll be amazing. It's always been, my second dream after radio to have this successful podcast, and it doing well, and it is doing nicely and growing steadily, but it's not easy. And, based on some of the things I said in the last couple of years, I'm paying for that in some ways, in the sense that not everybody has stood around to support you, but I know that people have, and more people need to find out about this podcast. So tell a friend, subscribe, tell your friends to subscribe, tell people that I'm still here and doing this podcast, and it's a lot more free, and I say what I want, say what I mean what I say, that whole skadoodle. And I plan to keep doing it, and I have high hopes and dreams for this next chapter with this podcast, and I'm not going anywhere. But having had, COVID for the last week, as I said, has made me think about a lot of different things, and I thought about what's most important to me, besides, of course, my wife and family and my mom and my sister and my nieces, my friends who mean the world to me, and the people who have stood by me and I've stood by them. What's most important to me are doing things we love doing in life, right? And if COVID taught us anything, taught you anything, I'm sure there's a lot of people who quit their jobs and have moved on to greener pastures since COVID happened, because they realized, if anything this taught us is, what are we doing? Time is precious, and we need more of it. Unfortunately, we're not getting more of it. It's set 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year after year. We live our life not knowing what's going to happen next, and we're thrown curveballs, and who knows, right? Health is everything. So do what you love. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Thank you for your continued support. This COVID thing has made me emotional. Honestly, thanks for your continued support. It's not about the likes. It's not about the views, even though in some sick way, as humans, we do that. We need that gratification. We need that satisfaction. You post a picture, and you're like, this picture didn't get as many likes as the last one. This story didn't get as many views. Add media as my title and something that I do, that's multiplied by 1,000, You're looking at that going, that video got this many views, that video didn't. You start to second guess yourself. You start to second guess some of the guests you have on. You start to second guess, and I think every guest I've had on has been fantastic. It's not like people are breaking my door down to come on this podcast. It's not easy to find guests, good guests. And so, people have to come out of their way too, and I try to facilitate that by driving people over here sometimes and making people feel at home, but it's not easy to pull off. It's easy to turn on a camera and just go on and do whatever, and attempt to do something that's contrived and scripted, and I'll do that and get my safe sponsors, and I'll never say anything controversial. I'll never speak from the heart. Very easy to do so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be successful at it. This is very hard to do. I'm not going to lie and say that I didn't have a hard on at the beginning. and it was like, we're off to a great start. And then everyone who did this prior to me, who I respect, has told me, Frank, you're going to, the beginning might be exciting, and then at some point you're going to hit the dog days of the podcast, where things are not making sense as much, and then summer hits and you get fewer views and less downloads, and you have a guest on that gets this reaction. Then you do a solo and you do great. Then you say something else and the numbers go down. You start to second guess yourself, but you just have to keep at it. And if you're doing it after the years through, and we're nowhere close to that, you should be in a class of very few people who are doing it and are successful doing it. So I took the advice from those people because they've done it for over a decade, and that's what I plan to do. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I thank you for watching episode 22, sponsored by the good people at Playground. Get your $10 in Freeway Play at playground.ca or by clicking on the link below on YouTube. Do that right now if you get a chance. Also, you could go to playground.ca/freewayfrank if you're listening in on Spotify, Apple, or the many other great platforms that this podcast is on. Not to forget, the Playground is Canada's premier location and destination for poker, incredible bad beat jackpots, and electronic gaming devices. Just go to their Instagram page, by the way, at Playground YUL, at Playground YUL, and see some of the past winners. It'll motivate you to go with your family and friends and spend a great night or afternoon there. The staff will treat you great, and it's just a fun place to hang out. Check them out, and I thank them for sponsoring episode 22 of The Drive-By, and we'll catch you again next week. Thanks, everyone.
This is The Drive-By with Freeway Frank.
Watch all episodes of The Drive-By on YouTube. Listen in on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, Podbean, and tune in.